Hey guys, what's up? Very late here with a commentary video. This time I'm going over the Sentinel, and I like the Sentinel for one reason in particular, and that is it counters Minotaur recons very, very well. So these three cruisers, the Loki, the Rapier, and the Hugin, are all incredibly potent ships that have become a bit more prevalent in the nullsec roaming meta as a response to sort of roaming gangs. Roaming gangs survivability is typically predicated on staying at range and being very mobile. And these ships, the Loki, the Hugin, and the Rapier, are two of which are cloaky, right? That you can surprise people with them. They're very, very good at preventing that mobility, right? These long range webs can go very, very far, especially with links. You have abyssals to deal with. And again, very, very good counter for roaming gangs to prevent their mobility around a grid and, for these groups to secure some kills. And the interesting thing about Rapiers, Hugins, and Lokis that makes the Sentinel a very good counter to these ships is that they have incredibly low amounts of capacitor and quite poor regen compared to other cruisers. And this goes for all cruisers, really. Things like, Orthruses, you'll see in this video here, the newts can be applied to so many cruisers, and the Sentinel makes short work of these ships that I think, may sometimes find or believe to have greater amounts of capacitor than they actually do. And we'll take a few examples into account with just some really simple napkin math. But when you especially consider these ships have things, they have cap expenditures, things like Hugins, Rapiers, they're all going to fit prop mods. Some are, of course, are going to fit their webs, right, which take a deal of capacitor as well. And when these ships have very poor regen, they aren't getting that capacitor back. And so when you have a Sentinel like this, these small neutralizers cycle very quickly. They also have incredible range. If you spring for things like A-type neutralizers or even abyssal neutralizers, you can make short work of this capacitor. And those things that they can't expend that cap anymore, right? They have no cap to expend. They cannot web anything. They can't move. And these newts are very good at cementing ships in place, as you'll see several times throughout this video. My Sentinel does that very, very well. And it also brings to the table an element of sort of amplification, so to speak. You lower the threshold for active tanks. You lower the threshold of things you can't, or I should say not lower the threshold, but you raise the amount of ships you can kill, the number of active tanks you can kill with your small gang. For instance, this gang only has a Draugr, a Phantasm, and a Cinnable, and so quite a not too much DPS at range. We have the ramping damage of the Draugr, but when you start to go to work on active tanks that are isolated, this this neutralization power really starts to work its magic, and you can start to crack these active tanks a bit more with a fewer amount of people. And this is only considering only one element of the Sentinel's control, and those are just its energy neutralizers. It has a second ability as well, which is the weapon disruption that it has as well. I choose to fit one guidance disruptor and one turret disruptor, and you can see here just by this screenshot, this frame of this recording, that there's an Orthrus and a Drakivec on field, right? Two quite popular ships right at the moment. Really sort of Triglavian ships in general are quite popular, and when these Triglavian ships shoot 100% in optimal range, your turret disruption becomes very, very potent at sort of breaking their. You can either choose to break their ramp, have them completely TD'd, right, disrupted, and have very, very poor optimals. They have to, load higher damage ammo. They have to there's very few ways for them to compensate. Tracking computers, not too many Dracovex fit tracking computers. They can't fit locust rigs. So their range, for the most part, is, it's kind of stuck in place. There are very few modifiers for Triglavian ship range, or Triglavian disintegrator ranges outside of drugs and tracking computers and the rare tracking enhancer on these fits. So you can even predict with a greater amount of certainty than other ships, what their ranges are going to be when you apply your tracking disruptor. And that allows you to be a lot more aggressive, as you'll see in this video. And this also keeps yourself safe, right? It leverages some sort of aggression on your gang. Your gang can be more aggressive in these sort of situations, and it also makes sure that you won't be projected to, because your tank is very, very light in this Sentinel. Especially the one I'm flying has a plate fit, which I like just to sort of just have that buffer there, because the align time is quite poor, the sig is quite poor, and just having the upfront EHB is quite nice for me to have as well. But even drones are quite scary. Drones will whittle you away, But your disruption, very good at making sure that other things don't apply to you. For instance, as soon as I get luck on this Orthrus, you'll see that I GD him immediately. So let's go ahead and start this recording. Let's see, I'll do 90% speed. 80% speed was too slow last time. But here, this fight starts when my alt tackles this Gila, and we warp in all of our ships. I'm here with a Phantasm, and soon to be a Sentinel and a Draugr. This, you'll see here the Retribution's burning, and you'll see here he just about stops here in a few moments. But again, these Newts very good at cementing ships into place. And another note as well, especially for this example, the Retribution and other assault frigates, you can also deny that ADC, right? If you see a ship burning in, I think this only works if you choose to nude it first, as opposed to putting damage on it and nuding it, because the ADC requires a shockingly low amount of capacitor to activate, and so if you decide to shoot something, they're more likely to get the ADC off than if they just lose their cap. I think some players won't, and they have no reason to, right? Either way, you deny the utility of the ADC. If you're nuding them and they decide to do it just in case, but you don't apply damage, or applying damage to something else, or perhaps you're holding light missiles or rapid lights, or whatever, then you deny this ADC in either case, right? It's a completely wasted mod for them. So very strong at that as well, nuding things out completely, and you'll see here just a good application of weapon disruption. And here's our first case of Minotaur Recons, right? Hugin just warped in, and I do make a bit of a mistake here. When you're a hammer, or essentially a counter, really, the Sentinel is by no means a giant hammer. It's more of like a mallet, I guess you could say. Everything, the ship was designed to nude out these ships, right? And here you can see the second of the three ships that I mentioned, Loki and Hugin, here right now in front of me, and I'm very eager to nude them out, right? And so I'm sort of in between this Drekavac. I shouldn't be over here, but you see I correct here. But had this Loki been already fit, I'm not even TDing him. I could very well be, one shot quite easily with a lucky roll. I do see his autocannon fit, so I'm really not too concerned. But right now I'm just in a really poor position. I'm 50, 60 off a Loki and a Hugin. That's well within, Fed Navy web range if these guys decide to heat. So I decided to correct and go over there a bit. I throw my ECs on the Drekavac, and you can see these Lokis and Hugins are burning in, and this is the application, or sort of the example I like to show, that's perfect for, you can consider these ships are using their micro warp drives, right? They're burning into us, and so they landed at 100% capacitor probably, just to play the benefit of the doubt, and these guys are burning into us, and so now they're going to be at lower than 100% capacitor. That goes without saying. And so my newts are going to take even fewer cycles to cap them out completely, and that's exactly what I'll do when this Loki gets into range here. I think I switched my ECs to Loki. I think we want to keep the Drekavac dry. We don't have damps or anything really to prevent the Loki, and the Loki's web is going to be very, it's deadly, right? It's deadly to me, and the ECs aren't exactly reliable, and he could web any one of us at any moment. So I decided to start nuding the Loki and drop them on the Drekavac. Spoiler alert, this Drekavac will MJD later. I think he was completely buffer fit, so he was able to regen capacitor that I wasn't nuding him, but this is the decision I had to make. This Loki's burning into us. He's a very deadly target, the ranged web. We'd rather lose a kill than lose one of our ships, right? So this Drekavac comes really close to dying, but MJDs after presumably regenerating some capacitor here. And the Loki's, I think, nuded out completely now. You'll see he's not micro warp driving in. We don't have a scram applied, and of course this is when the Drekavac MJDs. But this is the decision I had to make, right? This is just kind of how it is. We don't have a whole lot of people to we're not able to get the scram in time. But now a Hugin lands right on top of this Loki, so we have two webbing ships on top of us, sort of well within their own web range. And one note that I should be doing here, the Loki's already sort of dry. I have the decision to, I don't know, I throw ECs on the Hugin, which is a mistake, because the sensors on the Loki are much lower than that, or I should say the sensors on the Hugin are much stronger. But now an Orthrus warps in, so now we have a long pointing ship and 2 long-range webbing ships on top of us at, whatever range. So Hugin burns away for whatever reason, and we have a 3rd rapid light ship. So we have 2 rapid light ships, 1 long-range pointing ship, and 2 long-range webbing ships, like, sort of in front of us. So this is a very sort of, it's a weird moment. Not weird, but it's very scary. And our Orthrus, our Sentinel gets webbed by something, I think, so I heat my neutralizers, and the Hugin drops webs, burns out of range, or what have you. But if you have ECs, put them on things like Loki's, because Hugins and Rapiers aren't going to get jammed as reliably. Your chance to jam is, I think, less than half of that of what it would be than to jam a Loki, because the sensors are much weaker on the Loki. I think I feed my stiletto here. I try and point stuff, scram stuff, whatever. But when you're flying a ship like a Sentinel that, has quite a bit of ISK pumped into it, it's very, very fragile. Feeding a stiletto doesn't seem so bad. But here, what is it? What's my neutralization on? It's on the Osprey. I stop it here. I think I'm going to put it back on the, not back on, but I think I'm going to put it on the Orthrus. You can see he's burning at 726. I think he's webbed by something. No, it can't be. He's slowing down. Again, here's where I feed my stiletto. But cruisers like the Orthrus have similar levels of cap to things like Rapiers and stuff. And really, cruisers in general have around the same amount of capacitor. I think it's overestimated. And this is what just makes the Sentinel very, very potent. You can see here that I'm sort of cementing this Orthrus in place. I need him out for a few cycles with 3 neutralizers, but I really only need 1 small to keep him dry. And nothing else seems to really be burning here. And I'm also not applying my weapon disruption as I should be. That's a mistake of mine that I'm not doing here. But there's a lot of things to consider. So I'm sort of overwhelmed, I guess you could say. So I'm applying this disruption quite late. He's also not locking me, but yeah, I still need to be disrupting him because he doesn't need cap to fire his missiles, of course. And I need to keep my gang member safe as well, especially considering rapid lights will still apply very well to a Phantasm with an afterburner, and of course will apply well to a Sentinel. These 25,000 damage, 24,000 points of damage, on these rapid light clips are still very potent against cruisers, not only just to frigates like mine. So applying disruption for your cruiser gang is very useful in that regard also, because when you cut down the time on the flight time on these missiles, especially on an Orthrus, their range goes down even more than something normal like say a Serb or an Osprey Navy, for example, because if their flight time is so incredibly low, half of their missiles will disappear within like the first tick, and they'll only get 10-kilometer range or something crazy, and half the time their missiles will 90% of the time their missiles will travel 20 kilometers with the disruption, and 10% of the time they'll travel 20 kilometers, and the other 90% of the time they'll travel 10, or something crazy. This Ishtar turns out to be active fit, and so again, just the energy neutralization, very nice at sort of at amplifying your damage to a degree. Not so much amplifying, but definitely denying the active tanks on grids like this and make them a bit more easier to kill. Dragovec comes back in. I have my disruption on the Osprey Navy. There's a second Osprey Navy, but he's way far away. One thing you have to consider on the Sentinel is that your disruption range exceeds your lock range. So you have to do some stuff like threading the needle, or just being cognizant that things can outrange you. Things have much. There are things, of course, that have weapon ranges further than your lock range, and so that gives them the opportunity to outrange your lock range and not ever be within your disruption range. And you sort of have to go back into range to apply your disruption to keep yourself safe, because if they can apply to you out of your lock range, then you of course won't be able to disrupt them, right? And so that's sort of what happens here. I'm able to secure this Osprey kill, again, just sort of cementing this guy into place. He has no cap, he can't burn. Very good elements of control here, just TDing this Dragovec. Now our Phantasm's safe, our Sentinel's safe, our Jogger's safe. This Dragovec's not ramping on anybody. Very good tracking there, good application, very good damage. Being denied, but my newts are going on this Osprey Navy to sort of keep him within damage range and stuff for our gang, because we can only point, or we can spread our points, but our damage ranges of course are different, and keeping them both in the same place allows us to do two things, right, as opposed to choosing one target to shoot and finish, or perhaps splitting out. That prevents that situation as well. I don't know if this Drek dies, but we're going to go ahead and go on to the next clip, which is part 2 to this, and you can see here that they escalate with quite a bit more. You know, they have a Phoenix here, and I just want to point out they have a Rapier also. So in one fight, between 2 clips of the same night of roaming in the same system, you've seen 3 of the ships that I mentioned just previously, Rapier, Hugin, and Loki, all 3 webbing ships here here during these 2 clips. So take that take from that what you will, but that's exactly why I've decided to fly the Sentinel so frequently. And so this fight becomes a little hectic. You know, I have a Kikimora that of course needs to be TD'd. I cannot let that Kikimora ramp on top of me. I split my newts here. I have 2 on the Rapier. I neuted him for a few cycles, so I'm confident that 2 will probably keep him dry. You know, he's not moving at all. I do nuke this Orthrus, I think, for a cycle. And our gang's able to secure that kill, spreading my my guidance disruption to them to keep them safe as they play very, very aggressively. I think I lose lock or something on the Kikimora, maybe, who knows, but my guidance disruptor can probably go on this Drake now. Drakes with heavy missiles, things that are considered to have anemic DPS. And you can see that Rapier warped off. I don't know if you guys saw that, but he warps off because he has no cap and he's useless, right? So he's going to come back, and that's one thing. I can't secure kills for a gang. I can only just immobilize them, and that's probably a counter to a Sentinel. It's just warping out when you have no cap. If you're ever faced against one. My gang finishes his Kikimora. I think I decide to put my tracking disruptor and my newts on this Harpy to help out my Jogger. Casper's just probably going to town on this Harpy, having he's not being applied to or anything. A second Harpy is up here at the top. I make sure to warn Casper about that. And Casper takes a bit of time to kill this Harpy because the Jogger doesn't have an incredible DPS to begin with. But things like Triglavian ships they scale well with control, like the Sentinel, because when you're controlling a grid, you're buying yourself some more time and some more sort of leverage to get that ramp off of. And for instance, the guidance disruption, if you TD something, you can trade a bit better, right? You can start to get that ramp off of. And against things like this, normally had the Sentinel not been here, like our Jogger would have a very hard time against these 2 Railgun Harpies. They would apply very, very well to him, but since I have newts and turret disruption, the Jogger's time on grid is maximized, and he can sort of trade and get that ramp off of very, very comfortably. I do some, for whatever reason, I decide to ram this Gnosis, just some mistakes double clicking here, it happens, but just be cognizant of where you are and where you're headed towards so you can recover from that, as I do here. And really just sort of we have to be cognizant of the Phoenix range. We know he has computers and stuff that we can see those effects. Be sure you know them, because they're very helpful to sort of make inferences about how dreads are fit. And this could very well be a 100-kilometer javelin torp, rapid torp Phoenix, right? That could blap any one of us off the face of the grid. So we definitely want to be cognizant of that. When he's in siege, my guidance disruptors aren't going to be doing anything. I feed my alt here. Big surprise. I feed 2 in lots of the time, more often than not. So always replacing ships and things like that when I'm dual boxing, because that's what starts these fights, right? Tackling the Gila is what got this entire response, and I can't do that in the Sentinel, but the Sentinel's important to the fight, so I have to do that on things like alts and stuff. But yeah, pretty cool fight going on right here. Nuding out this Harpy, canceling his damage. I don't know, the TD's a bit redundant. He's not going to be regenerating cap. He doesn't have a cap booster. So, but there's really nothing to TD. In fact, what is this? Second Harpy landed at the top here. So I'm probably going to TD that as well. Get to work on nuding him. I nuked this Gnosis out. Battle Cruisers also, kind of low-ish amount of capacitor, but really, newts are amazing. Because everything needs cap to do stuff, right? With the exception of things like missiles and whatnot. I lock this Harpy. Let's see, do I put my TD on him? Newts? Come on, what am I doing? Right, watching these recordings, sometimes you're critical of yourself, which is why everyone should record and watch your own footage, because you get to look at your reaction time, you get to improve, you get to see the mistakes you make, and these similar situations come up quite often. This Scythe Fleet issue, here's one point that I'll make. This Scythe Fleet issue, of course, landed at 0 on this Plex, right? Or not Plex, but this Anon, right? And he's using capacitor, probably 2 or 3 micro warp drive cycles. And this is what I'm talking about. These Mimitar, not Mimitar especially, I'm using it as an example because they have the poorest amount of capacitors, but any ship really, Mimitar in general. But you can see 1 cycle, 2 cycles. Let's see if he stops. Maybe he stops. Maybe he's capped out in the middle here. Yeah, now he starts to stop. So that was only 2. So 600 gigajoules of capacitor neuted, I think, just about to cap out this scythe fleet completely. And he's got no cap, right? And these small newts very good at keeping him in place. Scythe fleets sometimes fit cap boosters, Kaidi ones with dual LSEs, but this cruiser, right, Sentinel making short work of cruiser capacitor is basically the takeaway from this video. And most notably, I guess you could say Rapiers, Hugens, and Lokis, all 3 of which, by the way, were in this video. Again, take from that what you will. They're quite prevalent, so be wary of them in nullsec when you're roaming. I don't have my guidance disruptor on anything right now. That's a mistake as well. I could have it on the scythe fleet issue. I'm really concerned about the Macarial that just landed previously because I've had a very bad experience with them in the past, especially with the Sentinel specifically. I've gotten alphaed by them in Cobalt Edge before, and so this is where I just sort of decided to call it quits, because if our element of control isn't able to stay on grid, then there really isn't too much of a point to stay, or we can't, it's a very big risk and very low reward for what's here and what we have. So we decided to get out, especially considering this, I have to lock this Macarial. I had the decision of, tracking disrupting him and taking the risk that his range still kills me and he can still track me, because the nominal decrease in already Macarial tracking even from my Sentinel disruption is very, very low. If he goes from 1.2 tracking to 1.0 tracking or something, that's still a very small nominal decrease, and so he still might be able to track whatever it is that he can track. And the range for the same thing, he has incredible range despite my disruption. So it's just a huge risk staying here, and we decided to call it. And this concludes this video, so thank you all for watching. The Sentinel's super fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this recording. I think I have this on my channel for a raw recording, and you guys can watch it. I'll link both of them in the description so you guys can see what we're talking about on comms. Some people like that. So yeah, again, thank you guys for watching. I will be with you. I will put out another commentary video on the Curies next week. Very good fight against some, sort of, I think, a roaming Russian gang, or perhaps some residents in nullsec. We run into them. It's a really cool fight in the Curies. I get to talk about positioning and all sorts of cool stuff for a sort of romanticized electronic attack frigate and small gang. So again, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, let me know why you liked it. If you absolutely hated it, if you don't like this format or anything I did differently, you felt I did differently in this vid, let me know. I like changing stuff up just as much as you guys. But like it if you enjoyed the vid, dislike it if you didn't like the vid, and thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys next week.